Well, it's been a while since my last video. This is the product of a 40-watt laser engraver that I recently purchased. So when I got it, I wanted to go back to some of the previous builds that I've done and use it instead. So as you see, it's the square bore. With this one, basically I used the laser to cut everything on here, or engrave everything on here as it may be. You can see, for example, when I cut the holes, you can see the actual smoke on the side there, and you can see the side cut very well, how dark it is. On the back, I did finger joints to hold the sides together. On the top, just made a cap piece with a half circle on it to do that. And in the middle here, there are two vertical pieces that constitute the block. They're not next to each other, they're slightly separated to constitute the block to go from the slow air chamber up to the collinear flow section, then against the sharp edge. Also, the piece on top here, the block on top, was made with a laser, as was the piece that holds it on, the leather here, for the fun of it. So I can just say that basically I made it all with the laser. Let me show you the parts of it. Okay, so here we have the piece that with the sides put on with the finger joints. In the middle here you see the two vertical pieces that constitute the block. I put quite a bit of glue on each side and a little bit of glue in the middle too, to try to make sure that it's airtight, to force the air to go up and over to go into that section that's on top. Also, I put glue inside and on the outside, basically just trying to do a seal. I know it's not very reasonable to do that because it creates this kind of glue smear, but again, my main interest is just trying to get it to work. I just want to make the flute sound nice, and I think a little bit of glue on the inside has no real effect on it. The two pieces that were used for the block are just two little sections like this, and they're just separated a little bit and then glued in place, and glue put in the middle, just so that it would act as a larger block. I didn't like it at all because as I tried to put in the pieces, they would turn any which way they could, basically to relieve the pressure of my pushing them down. I think next time I'll just glue maybe 3 or 4 of these pieces together into one solid block and push those in. At the time I just was like, oh, I could just put 2 in and it wouldn't be a big deal. And it works just fine, but it was a lot more trouble than I'd like. Here's the piece on top. Basically this is a square with a little half circle cut out of it. I think I've forgotten to mention, but the wood itself is 3-ply, 3mm Baltic birch. And the last piece here is the block that goes on top. And it's made from just 4 pieces that are glued together. Each piece was like 80% less in the width dimension than the previous. And I just did a little stair-step effect for the fun of it. Also, like some of the blocks you'll see actually kind of overshadow the air, the section that actually the air comes out when it vibrates against the sharp edge. So by doing this both ways, if you find that this overshadowing is bothering you, you can always just reverse it, and then there would be no overhang, rather, not overshadow, but overhang by just turning it around. The top piece, as I mentioned before, the holes were cut with the laser as well, and you can see on there the smoke that was dragged across by the vacuum effect, causing this kind of an effect here. Excuse me. The piece in the middle here, usually you have to dig a little bit of a channel so that as the air comes up, it shoots along the channel and then hits the sharp edge. In this case, I used the engraving function of the laser, and I had to mess around with speed and feed and all that kind of stuff and power to get the shallowness I liked. And believe it or not, it's actually rough in here. I don't know if you hear it. So it's not perfectly smooth. I mean, the early ones I did, I sanded these things, you know, up to 240 or whatever, to try to produce a very smooth edge. But as I'm going along, I find that these rough section here really makes no major difference in the flute as far as I can tell. If you wanted the most mellow sounding flute whatsoever, then you probably would want to try to make sure that you get everything perfectly smooth, perfectly sharpened, all of that jazz. But in this case, just going across with the engraving worked just fine. What else there is I can say about it? Not much really. Again, it's the square bore as I've been trying to do with other instruments. And I don't know if I ever said why I actually make these square instruments, but the reason is that one of the earliest videos I did, or probably the earliest video I did, was for a piece, was for like a practice chanter and drones set. And it was, I think, in Purple Heart, and it had a bore about, you know, this long, and maybe that would be the tenor, and then maybe the basses were this long. And there was a very tiny hole, maybe 1/8 of an inch in diameter. And the problem was I just had nothing that was 1/8 inch in diameter that would be a long enough drill bit. So I'd read about, what was it, organs, pipe organs, back in, you know, when they first started making the pipe organs, and the long pipes were actually square, not round. And so that made me think, well, probably the actual compression waves don't really care about the cross section. They just want to compress in and out. And so that gave me the idea of just going ahead and slapping together pieces of wood to create a square. The video is like early on, and it rather sounded nice. And then I thought, well, that's what I'll try to do with everything. I'll just make everything square. Why not? It makes it easier to assemble, and it creates a bit of a difference in the instruments themselves and the building techniques, and it just makes it more interesting to make. So that's really why I started making these square bores, is because I just didn't have a long enough drill bit to create a cylindrical bore. That's about it. I'll just play a little bit more and call it a day.